I have had that experience. I was looking for a house and the lease was not even a personal lease. It was a corporate lease. And the lady just said straight, see, that's what I like sometimes about racism. I like it when it's blatant. Because usually you have to deal with racism that's, sort of covert.
Yeah.
And this was just overt. This is like, no, we're not going to rent out a house to Indians. And I said, oh, okay, well, I kind of have black eyes and black hair like you, but fine. At least you're honest and upfront about it. And this happened many years ago.
It's terrible.
But it's still happening today.
Terrible.
So this is what makes it such an interesting story for me, because I think the recent expat Indian story hasn't been told much. I may be wrong, John. What do you think about Southeast Asian literature?
I don't know enough, but I would tend to agree from my experiences and the books that I've seen. There isn't, we don't read about this type of milieu enough.
Which is also why it was quite shocking for me to read it and go, oh, wow, I didn't think this was, happening.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Asian Bookshelf, where we explore Southeast Asia's literary landscape. If you are a discerning reader, perhaps even an aspiring writer, you are in exactly the right place. We interview acclaimed writers and key industry figures to explore Southeast Asia's literature. And we take a deep dive into its narrative elements, characters, themes, and emerging trends. We explore what works and why. Can a particular book be translated into another medium, say a movie, a documentary? What literary trends are emerging in our region? Is it all romance, or are non-fiction graphic novels on the rise? We believe in-depth conversations like this will enhance Southeast Asia's English literary scene. The Asian Bookshelf is produced and co-hosted by acclaimed writers T.A. Morton, Jon Gresham, and presenter me, Devika Misra. We're all Singapore-based, but of Irish, Australian, and Indian heritage, and bring our own unique insights and experiences to Southeast Asia's stories. Please join us on the Asian Bookshelf, home to words and voices from Asia today. In this episode, episode 4 of the Asian Bookshelf, we will discuss the award-winning novel The Campbell Gardens Ladies Swimming Class. I'm podcast host Devika Misra.
I'm writer T.A. Morton.
And I'm Jon Gresham.
Local publisher Epigram selected The Campbell Gardens Ladies Swimming Class as its 2023 fiction winner. The story is about a group of Indian women learning to swim in their apartment block, Campbell Gardens, and our focus will be its colourful, very colourful characters and their deep-rooted beliefs, prejudices even, I would say, and seemingly many inhibitions. I have to say, off the bat, I started kind of hating this book, and then, over the course of reading it, I loved it in the end. What do you think, Tracy? Did you like the book?
I kind of felt the same, I've got to be honest. But in the end, no, I did. I actually think this could be a really, really good TV show. It should be a TV series. I feel like if they did it apartment to apartment, every character has their own episode and then they all come together so you can see different points of view, would be magnificent. It would be such a good TV show.
Wow, I didn't think of that. But, talking about old sitcoms, Singapore locally produced something called Under One Roof, which was about people living in an apartment block, neighbors, and how they related to each other. So imagine if this is a slicker version and Netflix took it up. To me, initially the characters, John, seemed a little one-dimensional. I mean, Suchi seemed well fleshed out, but I just felt there wasn't enough tension. Did you see them as a composite, too similar, blurring into a mass?
No, actually, I did enjoy it. I found valuable insight into a group of Indian women in their condo in Singapore, and their helpers too. And I thought that was good that that Vrushali wrote about them and their own lives as well, and about all of their efforts to find meaning through learning to swim. So the characters for me, they didn't merge into one. I did feel that they were quite different, and it was nice to see those arcs of female empowerment when they're dealing with issues like skin colour and body image and growing in courage and exploration of more difficult issues like infertility and class difference. But in terms of more tension, yes, I did think it needed more tension, but that's more like my own personal taste. And I think you do have to recognise that this is like women's commercial fiction centred around women's lives and empowerment arc for them. So the tension's always going to be different. Like I would like to have a kidnapping or an affair or a murder in there or a talking monkey, but that's just me and my macabre taste.
I just found it very interesting that Junnarkar equates the activity of swimming with being free, freedom.
Suchi sat in silence, looking dazed. She could not believe she was engaging in conversations about swimsuits when she had not even asked Mandar's permission to attend the swimming lessons. Her predicament felt like that of an intercaste couple who exchanged engagement rings without the consent of their parents.
Tracy, what do you think of this metaphor, swimming as freedom?
Well, I think swimming as freedom acts almost like, well, it is a symbol of equality in this book. And I feel like it really has been explored before in literature. You know, there's that short story, The Women's Swimming Pool, by Hanan Al-Shaykh, which really did come to my mind reading this. You know, women learning to swim kind of helps them explore their own freedoms and, you know, find kind of their own position in themselves, but also in their community. The issue I really had at the beginning of this book was about Sushi and buying the swimming suit and the whole dinner she had to do for her husband. And she was kind of buttering him up to ask his permission to take swimming lessons. And Devika, I'm sure you remember that I wrote to you and I said, when was this book written? Because it felt like it was written 40 years ago. And the book is brilliant. I mean, it's a lovely tale. But I did really have some issues as from a Western point of view and you know, being a feminist and, you know, bringing up, you know, a future feminist, you know, I did definitely have issues with it. So, yeah, I did find that hard to relate to.
Yeah, I did wonder about this, being relatable to a larger audience. But honestly, I was not surprised. I mean, when Tracy asked, when was this book written? Yes.
But that does reflect, I think, the reality of many different cultures and societies, that women are controlled by men.
Yeah.
And frankly, they are in Western places like Australia. You see a lot of that, a lot of domestic abuse and a lot of crimes committed by husbands that are kind of washed under the carpet. So I think even though I understand and respect your perspective on that, I think it does reflect our own privilege and the fact that we have grown up in liberally progressive families and societies. Whereas, you know, my experience in Indonesia and in Thailand is that there are cultures and families where the women are treated that way and don't have that empowerment that we perhaps take for granted.
Yeah, I would go further, because it's not about abuse. You know, you guys are on either end of a spectrum here, right? It's abuse or it's empowerment. I think these women are just socially conditioned to want this. They want to be good mothers. They want to be good wives. And this is very much India today, I might tell you, Tracy. When I was growing up, which was a long time ago, I don't want to say when, there was much more feminism. And today, India has moved to a much more what should I say, right-wing religious society, and these social norms are valued. And this group of Indian expats that live in Singapore are very real. They share these values of, for example, looking down on people who are dark-skinned. There's many times this word used, savli, which means dark or dusky. And even today, if you look at ads, matrimonial ads, there's people want fair-skinned women, and they want educated women. But guess why? Not for the woman to work, but so that she's educated enough to be a good mother.
Yeah.
So it's the role of the mother, it's the role of the wife, and these women buy into it.
Yeah, but that's also why the husband agreed, was because of the benefit of, in case their son got into trouble and got into any trouble in the water, and therefore if she could swim, then she could save him. So yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and what did you think of the interpretation of the expat Western
I really
woman?
loved that. I actually think our author was incredibly perceptive and really good at observing all cultures. There was definitely women that I have met and can really recognize. And I think there was one quote in particular, it's towards the end of the book when they are discussing other expat women, and this is the beginning of the quote. You know, the women I had lunch with, their talk was so different from ours. We kept talking vegetables, cooking and tuition classes, but they were talking stuff like gymnastics lessons, sleepovers, and a beach holiday on some private island I've never heard of. They have so much free time. They're always partying or having barbecues, discussing Botox and snail cream, end quote. And I really love that. I mean, I don't think it's just Western expat women. I would hate to generalize like that. I think it's across the board, but she was very good at pointing that out.
She was.
John, do you know what snail cream is?
Do you not?
No.
Why?
Snail cream?
It's really
no,
good
I don't
for
know
your
what
skin.
snail cream is. I've never tried it
Korean
personally.
beauty.
Probably I do need to try something like that. I'm glad this is a podcast and not
A beauty
YouTube.
show.
So, John, what did you think?
Yeah, look, I really enjoyed the warmth and comedy of
Yeah.
the story. I thought, you know, things like Suchi's relatives telling her that everybody in Singapore eats snakes and cockroaches, and the competition and jealousy of some of the characters with their domestic workers like Latha and Julie, and again, both of them seem to be lacking agency. You know, there's other writers in Singapore that write about female agency and empowerment. For example, Balli, Kaur, Jaswal in Now You See Us, which is now out in paperback. And that story is centered much more around the domestic workers and a particular murder. But again, has the same type of good arcs about female empowerment. I think one of the things that is interesting is the way that she writes about domestic workers.
Yep.
She has a domestic, I won't spoil it, but there is a role for domestic workers in this story. But I do think she could maybe have explored how domestic workers aren't necessarily allowed to join the swimming class, or maybe have one of the domestic workers trying to join the swimming class and seeing how it goes. I mean, what did you think?
I mean, I've got to tell you, I had a domestic worker for a period of time, and the condo that I was living in, she loved to swim, and actually she'd go out and dragon boat racing on the weekends. And so she went down to the pool one day in the condo and started swimming, and she was actually told to leave by the security. And she came up, and my husband just, he lost it, went down to the management, complained.
Good on him, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, they had complaints from other tenants in the condo.
Yeah.
And we just moved here, and I feel like that was a real slap in the face.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is how you're going to treat like certain individuals.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you. I think that I think more stories should be written about domestic workers. I feel like I hope somebody's out there writing their story, because there's so much to be said and told and learnt from these women.
It was a pity that it had shrunk despite the hand washing. She was so careful when it came to her ma'am's delicate clothes, which she always hand washed instead of simply throwing them into the washing machine. She was aghast that ma'am could not fit into her swimsuit and blamed herself for it. Being the perfectionist that she was, this was unacceptable. She wondered if she should offer to take a cut in her salary for this blunder.
See, these are exactly the kind of relationships, employer and domestic worker, that made it for me the quintessential Singapore story.
Yeah.
Because it's really all about expats and in a transient Singapore. And the expats come from all over the world with just completely different ways of seeing the world, quite honestly. But I wanted to ask you something a bit more macro. This group of women, they're very, on the one hand, 2023 or 2024, right? They're discussing the cricket matches of today and the politics of today in India. So they're very connected to India. But yet they left India some time ago. And I'm wondering if you think expats in general just get frozen in time. Because to me, it seems that a lot of urban India has moved on from these women.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that's right. I think you assume that the place you have left doesn't change, and when you go back, like we used to go back every Christmas. It's almost like going back, and it's all about ghosts and memories. And you're always remarking about the building that's gone, or the people that have died or whatever, or got married or had a baby. So it is like there's a snapshot in time. And like I was a migrant in 1979 from England to Australia. So my view of England is always trapped in pre-Thatcher, dustbin, garbagemen and firemen on strike and Doctor Who. And then I moved to Asia in 1999. So my view of Australia is sort of snapshot of 1999, pre-September 11.
So I do feel these women are a little bit like that, clinging on to values and relationships that don't quite reflect modern-day urban India.
Yeah.
And the one character I wanted to talk about, Nenika, I have to say, she was the one I related to the most.
Yeah,
really.
me too.
Because she comes from a big city. And I think Vrushali Junnarkar brought that out in her character.
I was going to say, do you think it's her? Yeah.
I think she illustrates this dichotomy between rural and urban India.
That was well told.
Because Nenika has different values. She's not really under her husband's thumb.
Yeah.
She works.
She's affluent. She's a higher class.
Yeah.
She's lived for a long time in London.
Yeah.
And the key thing about her, wasn't it, that she hasn't got a helper. And some of the helpers were even rejecting her because of her colour.
Oh, but
her colour, and Vrushali writes this well, is slightly darker than some of the others.
Yeah, no.
So there's colour prejudice here.
Yeah.
What did you make of all of that?
But I also think, as you say though, but when she was the one too that when she was looking for a condo, right? And she'd ring up and they'd make appointments with agents, and then she has an English accent, and then she'd show up and they'd say, "Oh, but we thought you were thought you were English." And she'd say, "Well, no, I'm Indian." Well, not many landlords want to rent out to Indian families, which was just awful. But also, unfortunately, stuff I've also heard from people.
Well, I have had that experience.
Really?
I'm quite happy to share that experience. I was looking for a house, and the lease was not even a personal lease. It was a corporate lease. And the lady just said straight, see, that's what I like sometimes about racism. I like it when it's blatant. Because usually you have to deal with racism that's, sort of covert.
Yeah.
And this was just overt. This is like, no, we're not going to rent out a house to Indians. And I said, oh, okay, well, I kind of have black eyes and black hair like you, but fine. At least you're honest and upfront about it. And this happened many years ago.
It's terrible.
But it's still happening today.
Terrible.
So this is what makes it such an interesting story for me, because I think the recent expat Indian story hasn't been told much. I may be wrong. I don't know, John. What do you think? I don't know about Southeast Asian literature.
I don't know enough, but I would tend to agree from my experiences and the books that I've seen. There isn't, we don't read about this type of milieu enough.
Which is also why it was quite shocking for me to read it and go, oh, wow, I didn't think this was, happening.
Yeah, and I love the way she did it because, as John said, with humor. I read it by a swimming pool in Balli. I mean, it was the perfect book because it took quite serious subjects and just, brought them out and made it funny. And it took hilarious characters, caricatures, I was going to say almost. And kind of by the end of the book made them real for me.
I think so. And again, I think, as you said, she did a good job because rather than try and give answers to all these microaggressions, she basically just showed them how they maybe affected people in a realistic written sense.
Yeah.
So rather than try and give solutions and she actually just exposed them, and I think that allows the reader or a reader's space to actually come to their own conclusions and views about how to deal with these things in their own lives, which I think makes a good book. I also like, the bit where Suchi wears too much coconut oil in the pool, and then that all floats around the pool, and the instructor's wondering what this grimy, greasy stuff is in the swimming pool. And the Angmo sea creature who rescues Sushi from the deep end. So, again, very warm, very comedy. All the blokes obsessed with cricket. What's wrong with cricket? That's my question. No. I thought that was very good. And the comedy and the warmth was very good.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I just want to say, though, that I think there was one character that left me wanting more, and that was Ashley, the swimming instructor, with him and his white Speedos. And at the end, she just kind of reveals he's got these scars and he's had this traumatic past. And I'm like, what? What was his past? And so I would love to know from the author herself, I would have loved to know his backstory. I hope she writes his backstory, even if it's just a short story.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, because I think he was fantastic.
Yeah.
And if I was doing a series, if I was putting together a pitch for a series, I would place him, definitely his story, in amongst these women.
I think definitely in amongst it. But again, it's a female story about female empowerment. So the moment that you spend more time with Manda, the husband, the moment you spend it with the Angmo sea creature rescue, or with Ashley, the instructor, then you make it more of you do give a male thing. So I can understand exactly why she didn't really focus on that and make that a major arc.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Devika and Tracy. Today we've discussed the Campbell Gardens ladies swimming class and had a very enjoyable discussion about a very Singaporean story about expats in transient Singapore together with their domestic workers. We hope that you, listeners, have enjoyed this episode of The Asian Bookshelf and you've got a deeper understanding of Vrushali Junnarkar's The Campbell Gardens ladies swimming class. Coming up, we will discuss my book, Gus, The Life and Opinions of the Last Raffles-Banded Langur. So we trust that this conversation has given you as much pleasure as it's given us to produce. Of course, our interpretations and opinions aren't the only valid ones, and we'd love to hear from you. So do contact us at all the links in the show notes below. Please follow or subscribe to The Asian Bookshelf on your favourite podcast platform. Many thanks for listening to The Asian Bookshelf, home to words and voices from Asia today.